And hello, everyone, and welcome to Lessons Learned. This is a forum sponsored by Equality Ohio, our statewide LGBTQ equality organization, and the Buckeye Flame, our statewide LGBTQ news and views publication. I am Ken Schneck. I am the editor of the Buckeye Flame. For our next hour together, we're going to spend some time talking about the political and community landscape here in Ohio. And to do that, we have put together just the most wonderful panel of LGBTQ candidates, both past, present, and I have on pretty good authority, some of them future, to reflect on wins, losses, and the path to future victory. And I will introduce them all to you right now. First up is Sheena Marie Barnes, who currently serves on the Toledo Public School Board of Education. She was elected in 2019, and in all of her spare time, Sheena is the executive director of Equality Toledo. Hello, Sheena.
Hello, everyone.
Next up is Zach Stepp. Zach was a 2020 Ohio State Representative candidate for District 55 in Lorain County. Hi, Zach.
Hey, everybody. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Ken.
Next is Mark Carr. Mark was a 2020 Ohio State Representative candidate for District 71, which covers Licking County. Hello, Mark.
Hi, good evening, everybody.
And then we have Dara, Adkison, a 2020 Ohio State Representative candidate for District 57, which encompasses all of Huron County and parts of Lorain County. Hello, Dara.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here tonight.
And finally, joining us from a more southern part of the state, we have Reggie Harris, a 2021, that would be current candidate for the Cincinnati City Council. Welcome, Reggie.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you all so much. I will tell all of our, tip my hand a little bit and tell everybody tuning in that all 5 of these amazing panelists said yes within about 15 seconds. And I'm so appreciative for their presence and for their contributions, which will start right now. For all of our candidates, we want to know why. Why make the decision to run for public office and put your life out there like this? And we will start with Sheena. Sheena, why make the decision to run for public office?
Honestly, I was looking around for someone who, would fight for our children like I would. And after trying to talk to people to force them to run, they said, why don't you run? And I doubted everything about me. I'm openly queer, I cuss, I am pro-abortion, I am pro, Black Lives Matter. I will not win. And they was like, no, that's why you will win, and you should try. And then I tried.
And you won.
And I won. And made history as the first openly LGBTQ member for school board.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you. How about for you, Zach? Why do this?
Yeah, you definitely subject yourself to a lot. So that's a big part of the experience, but I think all of it's worth it in the end, knowing that you were able to be a part of the public conversation, around where the state needs to go. I'm sure everyone on this call has been listening to this week, Ohio being called a progressive state, by the governor, right? And trying to let's actually have a substantive conversation on what that would actually look like if we actually were a progressive state and that was enacted in our policies, and helping be part of that conversation of where we could be. Was something that was really rewarding to me and was appealing to me in running for office. And being from Lorain County, knowing that we still have a lot of work to do to make sure that every kid has an equal chance to get ahead. And looking at our elected officials that were representing the area, we weren't getting the job done, and we continue to fall behind other states. And I think it's so important that those with fresh ideas, different perspectives are not just a part of the public discourse, but helping drive it, right? Being a part of these conversations. And I think we were able to do that. And it's definitely something, got lots of thoughts, but it's a very rewarding experience. And I'm glad that we went for it.
Nice, thank you. Mark, if people don't know, I don't think Licking County would be described as the bluest part of Ohio. Why run where you are?
For exactly that reason. I am married. My husband is a teacher, to father of 2 children, 5-year-old and 6-year-old. And I have a burning desire to build a better world, and that includes my local community and district, for them. I'll share with you that I had to sort of put out of my mind the idea that this was a reliably red district. I get it. But more and more and more, the people that I talk to, there is a glaring gap of representation in our district. And so as somebody who has some skills in persuasion and influence from my day job, as they say, I thought I could go and make a difference. And it's something that I still do every day, even though I lost. I always tell people that I did win. You know, I had 30-some thousand votes for an openly gay married dad in Licking County. And so they can say what they want to say, but there were people, Democrat, Independent, and Republican, who voted for me and thought I was the best choice. And so I decided to run because as a kid who grew up on welfare and food stamps, you know, I looked at government as sort of a savior for me. We grew up on government assistance, and you know, it's really for me, government was this sort of thing that helped us. But as I got older, I realized that it doesn't always help me now, being an openly gay man. Or I have friends who are people of color, right? Or, you know, just all kinds of marginalized communities that just aren't represented here. And so I'm going to run again. I think it's important. But yeah, it's my kids. It's my 5-year-old and 6-year-old. I want them to grow up in a open and affirming and accepting place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why.
I can go back and re-edit the intro to say that you won, by the way. So if you're out there telling people that you won, I will support that. So
right. It was a win for sure.
Awesome. How about for you, Dara? Why do this?
Well, you know, in addition to being a candidate last year, I'm going into my 3rd year as the president of the Cleveland Stonewall Democrats. So I've been working with, you know, out and proud candidates in Northeast Ohio for, you know, going on 5 years now as part of this board. And I had been working with the House and Senate caucuses to try and make sure we had full slates of Democrats across the board, trying to convince activists I'd known for years that they should run. And we just weren't finding anyone to run in District 57. I asked a lot of people and I was like, well, this just feels like a thing that I have to do. Cause it felt wrong to have no one running. I knew it was a hard, you know, R+4 district. And I had never actually been in Huron County before running for this seat. I spent a lot of time in Huron County while running, you know, and they're just, I'd spent a lot more in Cuyahoga than the actual parts of where I live, you know, so there was a lot of getting to know my own area that was really important to me and had value. And, you know, everything that the other folks on this call are saying about wanting to do what's right for my family. You know, I'm an obviously queer woman, you know, with, you know, very queer looking family and a kid. And we just, you know, don't necessarily fit with the metric of what people perceive in this area, for sure. But it was really eye-opening and awesome to see how many queer people came out of the woodwork, both to support me vocally and in secret. And that kind of affirmation is why I ran, because you get to give people the visibility for seeing their own community they might not, because in rural areas, you know, queer people can be more quiet and reserved than other places. But it was really important to run. And I ran my campaign differently than a lot of people advised me to, but I still got, you know, the most votes any Democrats ever gotten in the district. And I feel very good about that, for who I am and for everything I was vocal about. So
Amazing. Thank you. Reggie Harris, a dancer, a social worker, and a candidate for public office. Talk to us about that evolution.
You're a funny kid. No, I mean, 4 years ago, I was driving to work. I was at a red light and I had a panic attack, and it freaked me out. And when I pulled over to gather myself, I realized I had a panic attack because a couple days before, I was working as a trauma therapist in a community mental health center. A mom said to me that her 2nd grader tried to jump out of the window, and I just like sort of proceeded with like logistics. I was like, oh, and has this happened before? And I felt mortified in the car. I was like, who am I? Like, how did I not respond with compassion? How did I not feel, you know, devastated by that and recognize I was numb? And then unfortunately later that week, I went to a social work conference and I learned the parable about the stream or the river. And I tell people this, everyone's like, oh, I know that story, but I didn't. And it's the story about the villager that rescued the baby from the stream. They got to the river's edge and then saw another baby and then came back to river's edge and saw another baby. And then all of a sudden the stream is filled with babies and all the villagers have come down to help rescue the babies, and the villagers set up hospitals and shops to rescue the babies, and the villagers are dying and the babies are dying. And finally this woman goes upstream and she's like, I'm going to check out who's throwing these babies in the stream. And when I heard that, that just knocked me out. It floored me emotionally. And I was like, oh, that's what I was feeling. I was feeling like I was drowning in the stream. And so maybe I need to move upstream. And so in my work and my job, so I moved from being a trauma therapist, now I work for a nonprofit affordable housing developer that we do mixed income development as a part of neighborhood transformation. And then running for office for me is the logical sort of extension of going upstream in terms of solving those issues. So for me, it was like the extension of my work as a therapist, seeing that like, this is how I address those issues.
I am now obsessed with the parable of the stream that I have never heard before this moment. So
Isn't it? It's an incredible parable, yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. Again, everyone, thanks for joining us. If you are just tuning in, this is Lessons Learned, sponsored by Equality Ohio and the Buckeye Flame, and we have just the most incredible panel for you. We want to talk about what worked well for you, what worked out well. We don't do the final tally, as Mark said, by the W or the L. It's also about connecting with communities, which we know that many of our colleagues sometimes struggle with across the country as LGBTQ candidates. So we'd love to hear from some of you about how you were able to use your own strengths. You are such different candidates. And many of you we've covered in the Buckeye Flame. I want to start with you, Zach. I hope that I'm not outing you here, but is it fair to say that you are not, say, in your 50s or 60s, Zach?
That's accurate.
Yeah.
25 now, you know, I feel like getting over that hump to 25 was like really good talking to the folks, that constituents like 65, you know, it's like 25 sounds better than 24.
Not that much better, but that's okay, Zach. I love it. I absolutely love it. Talk to us about how you went about connecting with voters.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, you gotta play to your strengths, as you kind of like we're saying, I think correctly. I mean, knowing that I'm not going to walk into a room, you know, and like just by my face, I'm going to stand out as like a politician, you know, doesn't really look like, you know, someone with great hair, you know, being older, what you would see down in the State House. And so you kind of have to lean into that, but also recognize the assumptions people are going to make about you, like knowing going into a room, if you're going to give a speech, people are going to see you and be like, oh, this is just some kid, you know, so you got to like totally put all that aside and just put your best foot forward and give a great speech. You know, you always got to be polished. You always got to know what you're going to say, and you always got to dress the right way. You got to execute everything perfectly, I think, as a young candidate, right? And there's so many things that, you know, if little things go wrong, people just kind of cast you aside. So I think being aware of it and then playing into your strengths, where I think my opponent, you know, didn't really have much of a like social media presence, for example, and being a young candidate, you know, I felt pretty savvy on social media. So making sure you double down on those strengths and kind of where you're spending money, developing videos instead of just relying on mail, you know, so really turning the youth energy into something that was how you can kind of brand the campaign. And I thought we did that pretty effectively, and also recruiting volunteers. You know, we had several high school students, you know, that were our regular phone callers. You know, we had a lot of college kids, you know, that were home because the pandemic, that were helping lead a lot of our voter contact efforts. And so I thought we were definitely successful in the number of the people that we reached and helping drive the conversation. You know, I mean, ultimately we forced the Ohio GOP to spend like $700,000, you know, trying to drag my name through the mud. And it's just crazy, you know, thinking about it in hindsight. It's like, wow, they really spent that much money. But I think it's a testament to that, you know, we did make a difference. You know, we made a difference on steering the conversation, you know, forcing them to have debates on substantive issues. And I think if you look at what the GOP is doing, they're forced to confront with Ohio has issues of like losing population and not being a destination that's welcoming not to just the LGBTQ community, but also, just younger folks in general. We are hemorrhaging population, year after year after year. And just now in the latest budget that the governor released, they're putting together this $50 million pot of trying to attract people to move back. That was a really big foundation for our campaign that we're trying. I definitely feel a little vindicated that the Republicans are like, oh yeah, maybe we do got to do something about this, or we're going to start losing elections. So I think we should really continue to hammer them on that, and hammer them on the regressive social, economic, all the policies. It's just still, I know I said this in the intro, I just can't get over that the governor said we were a progressive state. Every policy that comes out of this administration is regressive, whether it's social or economic.
Yeah.
So I think continuing to be a part of and drive that conversation is where we got to go from here. And I'm excited to continue playing a part of that conversation. And I hope that everyone on this call, not just the panelists, are going to continue to help push us in the right direction to be a more prosperous and inclusive Ohio, because those two are completely interrelated.
Thank you. Sheena Barnes, we spend a lot of time talking about the big C's, right? We spend a lot of time talking about Cleveland and Columbus and Cincinnati. But the fourth most populous city in Ohio would be the city of Toledo. How do you connect with voters in Toledo, in that area, which is a different environment than a lot of other places in Ohio?
It is. It's a big, small city.
Yeah.
That's really crazy about it. And I think the thing that helped me the most was I'm an organizer already for community engagement. And so was my campaign manager and my treasurer. So we knew how to hit the ground running on different topics. And that really changed the game, how we looked at it. Like, I think folks have a traditional way of running, which is, like Zach said, mailers and all. We knocked so many doors. We outdid actually all the candidates for that period. Like, that's including city council, treasurer, like everybody who knocked all those combined, we did that. 3 Black women did that. And I think that was really what we knew our strengths were, was getting out there, talking to people, and not really being like hesitant. Like Zach said, I'm really transparent with everything. I'm really open about what I thought about our school district, what I wanted to improve with our school district. And also I'm a mother, with kids in the school district. And so I think all those kind of played into my communication with the community a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Mark, there was not a point in your campaign where you were in the closet, right? And we see any number of our colleagues across the country, when they are in some of those more red areas, are not as forthcoming about their lives. How did you go about running a campaign right there in Licking County?
I think for me, the biggest thing was sort of just a transition of my everyday life. So somebody who grew up in Ashland County, I didn't have, but knew early on that I was gay, but didn't have any role models, mentors, anybody really to look up to, right? And so in my everyday life and in this campaign, I just wanted to be myself. And I didn't want to be the gay candidate, even though, I did have people tell me not to do that. And do you have to lead with that? I most certainly have to lead with that, because that's literally who I am. And I'm not ashamed of it. But I'll share with you that it was never an option for me not to be who I am. I have personally a wonderful bubble, right? Even in Licking County, where my husband is literally the middle school and the high school PE teacher. He is the track and field coach and the volleyball coach. I'm on the United Way. I am, we are in our church committees. Everybody sort of knows us, and I have this really great bubble, but I also realize in my peripheral how many people who aren't in the bubble. But I want them to see us at the grocery store, and I want them to see us in everyday life, and more importantly, in politics. I'll share with you, I'm twice Zach's age. I'm 53, and yes, I have a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old. You can put that together. But I get literally excited, like goosebumps, when I hear people like Zach talk, because Zach is part of the future I'm trying to create for my children, right? Zach is a part of the plan. Everybody on this call is a part of the plan. But, being gay in Licking County, being openly gay in Licking County, is it difficult because it's just who I am and I'm unapologetic about it, but I'm also aware that I am a voice for people who yet haven't found theirs. And I'm glad to be that, but it's sort of, I'm pulling them and pushing them at the same time.
Thank you. Thank you. Dara, I've never called you this to your face, but I've said it behind your back. So it's funny that I'm saying it out loud right now for the first time. But I do refer to you as kind of one of the kingmaker, queen makers in that political realm, because you are, as you said earlier, behind the scenes and really encouraging candidates to run. So for you to step forward and run, how did you use those skills that you've been encouraging and so many others to run your own campaign?
I mean, I don't know that I would describe myself that way. Thank you, I think. But no, I definitely didn't come into running being out of touch with the system. I've used Vote Builder before. I already knew who to talk to from the House caucus. Like, we'd been talking for months before I was like, okay, fine, it's me. And so I had some of those relationships already, but honestly, a lot of my existing network, being involved with queer politics for Cleveland Metro, didn't really help my campaign. It gave me some knowledge of how the political process works, more intricately than someone who wasn't involved in it. But, the Huron Democratic Party and the Lorraine Democratic Party are vastly different than what I'd worked with before, and vastly different than each other. And so I didn't bring that existing network, the indivisible groups, the local regional organizing groups, most of my volunteers, it were all people that I met and brought up and had no connection to my previous organizing. So I had the knowledge of how to establish things, but it wasn't something that was new. And it's a testament to, I feel like most of my volunteers fell into either college students or senior citizens, and my senior citizens made up the majority of my voter outreach folks. And I had a way of doing it that, fundraising for rural districts that are, plus for ours is very complicated, and I hate fundraising anyway. I like policy stuff. And so I had people do letters to their neighbors where I'd say, how many stamps do you have in your house? Senior citizens always have stamps. And they tell me how many stamps, and then my volunteers and I would send them, well, here's your 67 addresses of your neighbors. Here's a template letter. They'd send it out, and we got so much more response from that. And we sent out over 12,000 letters like that. And those letters, better than our door hangers, better than phone calls, better than texting, and that direct contact, but also finding creative ways to engage volunteers who, wasn't planning on running in a pandemic. Like, Zach and Mark both got to jump in a lot sooner than I did to the race last year. And, I had one event before a pandemic hit, and then I was like, okay, so we're going to reevaluate everything. Glad that I'm a data engineer, so I'm already comfortable doing my own data. I'm comfortable with the internet. Obviously I'm an elder millennial, so I'm familiar with social media, even if it hasn't been around for all of my adult life. And so it's that comfort was definitely an asset for reaching voters that my opponent had no interest in reaching, and was incredibly vocal about his lack of interest in reaching those voters. And if there's a lot of positives that am taking away and I'm continuing to take away from this run, but the amount of stuff that is tied to my opponent on the internet now that I've documented in detail, I feel very good about. And I hope that after redistricting, some of the quotes that he said in our debate about how Black voters in the district don't matter because there's a Black sheriff, I hope that's the end of his political career. And just being, someone who's willing to be vocal about what actually matters was biggest asset to me. Voters know you're honest.
Thank you. And shout out to Amanda Cole of Plexus, who has now trademarked the phrase queer maker. So that is going to stick, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be what our next forum is called. So thank you for that.
I might make a forum with that name. I'm going to write. Thank you, Amanda.
Reggie Harris, I am a political junkie, and I will say following the politics of Cincinnati in the past year has been both, entertaining from afar, but I would imagine challenging to be in the mix. How do you approach, you are in the midst of this, how do you approach campaigning, being Reggie Harris, but also being in this city that has really had some challenges there, particularly with the city council?
Yeah, that's a great question. Before we begin, I also want to just be very transparent. I'm a board member of Equality Ohio, so I want to shout out the organization that I love. And we have Siobhan and Gwen, and I see Dominic and Marshall McCall. So, whoop whoop. So yeah, let's get into that, Kansas. You want to bring that up? I feel like there's levels to that question. So one. I'll also add on this idea of being a transplant. I'm not a native Cincinnatian, and I also show up in Cincinnati in a very openly queer way. I'm born and raised on the south side of Chicago. My husband and I got married in 2009. We're an interracial couple, and so I think in Cincinnati, queer leadership looks very much like white, moneyed, cisgender male identified folks. And so there is not a lot of representation of out, Black gay folks in Cincinnati. And so I think there's a way in which I'm able to occupy that space because I'm not a native. And folks are buying what I'm selling, because it's, I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm talking about, but it also is not a direct challenge to the city's sense of self or sense of identity, yet I'm able to present myself as an alternative. I think that one of the things that I appreciate about Cincinnati is that if you are a no-nonsense, no bullshit hard worker, there's a way in which you can come into this city and affect change. And that's what I did, because I was at a space in my life where when we came here, my husband is a professor. He just got tenure, by the way. Yeah. He was, on his journey to becoming a tenured professor. We bought a house here. I'm like, okay, this is home. Let me shape the environment that I want to live in, right? When we moved in 2015, we had been married, already for 6 years, and got married in Massachusetts, lived in Chicago, lived in Boston. And so we were very much like, waiting for marriage equality, because we were not about to go live in a state in which, that was not a reality for us. And so we very much entered living in this city as how do we embed ourselves in all of the change systems? And so that has paid off. And so what happened is that my campaign launch was the day before the announcement of the third city council person who had been indicted by the FBI and arrested. This is a council person that donated lots of money to me out of the PAC that was in question, that endorsed me. And I found that we were able to pivot because I got into this race about the issues. Yeah. I got into this race about city change, about affordable housing, about education, and I'm a policy nerd, so we can talk the house down about these issues. And so at the core of why, because that was so central to why I'm running, I have found that I have not been engaged with, I have not had to navigate the pitfalls of the politics and the politics, because everything that folks know about me, when you go to my website, I was talking about those issues, right? I was talking about community engagement as a tool for transparency and ethics, because that's just what the work is, right? We knew that. So I think that I'm lucky in the sense that running as a non-native, I don't have that stuff that comes with being in the city, and people know me, and I've come to this position of working. I've come to this point in running because of the work that I did, right? And so there's nothing about my family, nothing about my church home, Nothing about like who I went to high school with. It was like, oh, Reggie, the guy who moved here from Cincinnati, I met him doing this work. I know him because of this committee. So.
Yeah, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about hindsight, which, as we all know, is quite 2020. What might you do differently? Can we start with you, Reggie? Have you learned any lessons already of things like, okay, I've had to tweak this midstream?
Yes. So I think one of the things that I would do differently is that I'm such so I studied this, like I went in like ready and knowing, and I actually think that there's some processes that I would have started earlier that I feel like are stressful in ways in which I would have thought, right? Like other things I would have started my petition signatures like as soon as I possibly could, right? Like that small thing is really stressing me out. And so there are little, just itty bitty things like that, where I think for a person like me that's very macro thinking about structure and systems, and that's in place. But there are these small parts of the campaign that take up more bandwidth than I imagine them taking. And I think the other thing that I would do is that I was not as vocal about running as I should have been. Right. So like I knew in my spirit that I was running in 2017, and I didn't really say affirmatively to folks that I was going to run until like late 2019. And I think in hindsight, I should have actually been saying, I should have said it, because I think that a lot of folks would have tuned into me in a different way if I had said that I was running and committed to that earlier.
Thank you. Mark, you've already said, and we're holding you to it because you said it on this call and it's being recorded, that you're going to be running again. What do you take with you? And I want to say, for Zach and for Dara and Mark, your campaigns were extraordinarily successful. So how do you build on that success to maybe have a different result, or how might you do it differently?
So I always knew that I would, during this presidential year where we were so divided, Republicans and Democrats, I knew that I would get Democratic votes, and I would get independents who leaned Democratic votes, only because it was really divided, right? And I knew I needed to spend my time persuading Republicans to vote Democrat. That's where I would win. But in my comfortableness, I found myself drawn towards activities with my own party and activities with those who were leaning towards, and I could have just said, I have their vote, and sort of switched earlier on and spent more time there, because it was really along party lines. I mean, it was even the independents who voted Republican in the past in the primaries, you can still see that, but being independent, I just didn't spend enough time there. And so my learning is that as I continue to be on local groups and committees, is to continue to reach out in sort of the off years, right? To build those relationships, because I have to understand that that's the only way you're going to win here. It's never going to be more Democrat leaning independents and Democrats. It's never, ever, at least not for a while, going to outnumber Republicans. And so I just need to continue that work. But when I campaign, I'll be doing it much earlier. And I'll ask permission of those who will vote for me and say, okay, I got your vote. Now I need you to come over here and help me persuade 10 people who have an R behind their name. And so that's my biggest learning. That's it. Yeah.
Zach, I followed your campaign very closely, and I have to say, I loved your use of social media. I loved just all the pivots around when all the first energy stuff was coming up, and just the way that you addressed it and you tackled issues head on. As you look back at your campaign, what might you do differently?
Yeah, I think the elephant in the room is Trump, right? Like, I think he was way stronger than we wanted to believe, and so when I think in terms of, what I would do differently, a lot of it hinges on the fact that I ran in a presidential year, You know, the fact everyone that ran in 2020, we ran in presidential years. You know, I think you would have told me in hindsight, Trump is going to win your district. Not only that, but Lorain County is going to go from voting for Hillary Clinton to voting for Donald Trump. You know, there weren't many counties in the country, you know, that went from blue to red, you know, in 2020. So I think you have to, like, that was kind of a reckoning for me at the end of the campaign, was like, wow, okay, like we still did better, you know, than my predecessor did, you know, but it was like the county, geez, it's not moving the way we wanted it to. But when I've gone through all the different crosstabs, you know, and my end conclusion is the more engaged voters, you know, are the ones that are coming our way. The more consistent voters, like historically, at least in the last 30, 40 years, you know, Democrats have lost in midterms because Dems aren't as reliable voters. You know, as we're seeing this big party realignment, you know, my hope is that a lot of the folks that are going to be not just fired up for progressive causes, you know, that they're also going to, more of them are going to get out and vote. But a lot of those kind of more traditionally Republican leaning voters that are high information voters are going to be turned off by this conspiracy GOP party. You know, this whole national narrative of this Representative Green, you know, she's the new face of the party, you know, and like, we got to make sure that she's the face and not Mitt Romney. He ain't the face of the party, you know, and I think, I don't know how much longer a lot of those people are going to last. Same thing with my opponent, Gail Manning. She ain't the face of the party. You know, the face of the party are these extremist Republicans down in Columbus, these extremists that are popping up down in DC. And I think that's going to turn off a lot of high information voters that are going to be reliable in the midterm years. So what I'm saying at in a very roundabout way is there's going to be a different electorate in 2022. Right? There's going to be a different party realignment in 2024. You know, so I think even what we did on being very targeted on the local issues is going to be even a more effective strategy in an off year when the electorate is smaller and it's less polarized than it is in a very high turnout election where you had to accept as a candidate in 2020, it didn't matter what I was selling, going to people's doors. It didn't matter. They didn't care. Like they cared, you know, but it was like, Trump or Biden. That's why they're getting out. You know, they felt really strongly about Trump, and on the margins, you could make some difference there. But the biggest determinant is going to be how does the top of the ticket do in your district? You know, and I'm hopeful in 2022 that there will be more districts that are more competitive because of redistricting, but also more in that we'll have someone at the top of the ticket, you know, that I think can be very hammering these Republicans in Columbus for the first energy scandal that they've never paid a political price for, one, and then also just the continuous regressive policies coming out of the State House. So different electorate in 22 that I don't think we can say Ohio is, you know, totally lost. You know, I think there's a lot of pundits that are like, wow, Ohio is now officially a red state. I think Trump was strong, but I don't think it's necessarily reflective of where we're going. And there's a lot of variables, a lot of uncertainty over what's going to happen with this party realignment. So I've not lost hope on Ohio. I've not lost hope on Lorain County. And I think that the playbook remains the same. Stay focused on the local issues, you know, address the problems head on. And that's what we tried to do. And anyone that comes to me for advice, I'm going to encourage them to do the same thing.
All right. I am trademarking Zach Stepp, A New Hope. I am getting those salon signs. It's there. It is there. Dara, I know that you analyzed the data and you looked at your race. As you look back at it, what might you have done differently?
Yeah, there are a couple things that I wish I'd gotten to do sooner, certainly. You know, a lot of the initial analysis for the region, for, you know, issues to focus on, where to focus on them, you know, writing up all my messaging, all of that, I wish I'd done sooner. That's one of the problems with jumping into a race, you know, literally like the, you know, 9th hour, like it's up there. And so that definitely puts you a little bit behind the ball for starting off. And there were a couple of other things that, you know, I got started on, you know, a few months in because pandemic threw everything off. Like I wish I'd started doing all of my outreach in Spanish like months before I did. And I got really good return on it. And we registered a lot of voters in Southwest Huron, you know, in Spanish when no one was out there registering those voters. And that was the first time that, you know, the Huron Dems had done that at all either. So it was new to them. It was new to me for that county, you know, and it was was good. And that kind of stuff I wish we jumped into doing a lot sooner. But other than doing things quicker, I do wish that I'd spent a little bit more time on messaging, targeting folks who were a little conspiracy theory focused, and a little bit less time targeting my base, for lack of a better term. You know, the district was very polarized. You know, it shows that in the numbers for sure. But I did not realize when I jumped in just how many, you know, militia members there were in the region, how many people there were who believed really, really out there conspiracy theories, not about national issues, but about local and state level policies and candidates. And I'm just like, you know, figuring out some kind of strategy for getting around those kind of issues for persuasion is something that I wish I'd definitely spent more time on, because it was just a lot to bring your average, you know, phone volunteer up to talking about any number of conspiracy theories in a way that was analytical and concrete, and not too much for them emotionally too. You know, that preparing people for getting threats over the phone was not something that I was really expecting to need to do as a candidate, but the amount of threats that some of my phone bankers would get when we were down in the bottom of the persuasion was high. And that's not experience that I had previously. I have a bunch of it now. But that's, you know, stuff that it's good to know going in, because then you can plan for it.
Thank you. Sheena Marie Barnes, in 2019, you won your election. But I'm feeling pretty confident you're going to run again. When you run again, can I just establish it? Can I just say when, not if? So when you run again, what might you do differently, even building on the success you've already had?
I think cutting the chatter out, you know, being a Black, queer, fluffy woman, you get a lot of opinions on what you should do, how you should dress, you know, wear heels, wear makeup, you know, don't wear shorts because your butt too big. And it started to eat at me to where I didn't know what should I do. Like, I didn't know, like, I was trying to, first of all, I can't walk in heels. Okay. Let's just put that out there. I am like a baby deer. It's horrible. It's just not a cute scene. And someone said, well, you're marching in the parade. You want to wear heels. And I literally brought heels to a parade to march in. And I was like, my feet is going to be hurt. I'm not doing this. And I got shunned for it. And so I think overall, I would just literally, like, you know, stand up for myself a little bit more towards our older population of what they think traditionally we should do as candidates. But also it helps to be like, you know, my webpage is now in the Library of Congress because I did my way. So, bloop. So that's that too. But I think really just, you know, knowing yourself a little bit more is what I would be looking for. Like, okay, yes, I'm hippie. Everything's going to look sexual on me, even from not trying to do it. But guess what? Get used to it. You know, I'm here for the kids, and that's what it matters.
Thank you. All right, we're going to ask our panel one more question. As we're talking through this, we encourage people to use the chat, and I see a question in there, and we're going to hopefully get to that. But if you do have questions for our panelists, we left a little bit of time for questions. There are any number of individuals that are contemplating a run, and we know that people talk themselves out of it. We know that LGBTQ people talk themselves out of it. I was telling Sheena before the call, running for public office was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. It was one of the most difficult decisions, but serving as an out elected official was wonderful. But it was very challenging. It was a challenging process, and even in an LGBTQ mecca like Vermont, I had people saying to me, "Don't be out. We don't need that attention." Right? So we know that there are people considering a run. I actually see names on this list. We have one candidate who the Buckeye Flame will be publishing a piece about tomorrow, who's announcing a congressional run. So we have candidates here in Ohio, but we also know that it's challenging here in Ohio to run as an LGBTQ candidate, to run as a candidate, period. So specifically in speaking to candidates who are considering running for public office, what advice might you have for them? We've covered, you know, things that you might do differently, but what might you say to them, something that maybe you wish had been said to you back then? Can we start with you, Dara?
Sure. You know, I would just say if you're thinking about it, you should just do it. You know, my family and I went back and forth for about 2 months debating if I should run or not. And I don't think those 2 months would have made the difference, but they sure would have helped. And, weighing back and forth the like, well, what if they do a horrible smear campaign? What if, we get threats of something? I'm like, at the end of the day, we didn't see anything. And maybe that was because it was a presidential year and the Republicans just felt like they were safe as safe could be. But at the end of the day, I didn't receive any of that. Like it never came out once from my opponent's mouth or from any other Republicans about my race. And I think that's one of the main concerns for LGBTQIA candidates when we're debating if we should jump in and run or not. So I just, just do it. And at the end of the day, your community's got your back. We can't vouch for everyone in the state or whatever district or community you're running in, but the LGBTQ community has your back. And that's definitely how I felt running it, seeing local business owners, seeing neighbors who I did not know were queer before, come out to me and be like, I'm so happy you're running. Thank you. And I'm like, oh, this is what providing visibility is. Yes. Cool. Like having high school students just like message me on Facebook and be like, so I didn't realize we could have a queer candidate in our county. That's awesome. And I'm like, thank you. And that it doesn't make the difference, but it does make a difference. And it's not that hard to get some signatures. There's lots of folks who'll help you do that, and message me if you need help with them.
Awesome. Thank you. Mark, someone is on the fence. They're thinking about running. They're not sure. What advice do you have for them?
Well, so you know what, when Dara was just answering the question and she said she didn't have anything, I thought, oh no, he's going to ask me next. And we did. We did have a hate crime, an FBI hate crime. We had things done in our home. But it was the day that the bubble that I always talked about, my little wonderful bubble that I live in, actually got burst. But, I live in a cul-de-sac with 5 houses. And the other 4 houses all brought me their Ring videos on their phone to show me. And, we were able to track the person down. But this is definitely a family affair. And I get a little emotional thinking about it because, again, having a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old who I send to school every single day with possibly a teacher, principal, superintendent, janitors, anybody who could have an indifference to my lifestyle was frightening. And again, I get emotional thinking about it because those are my children. And then my husband, right, being the out male gym teacher, right, or PE as he calls it. Gym is the place PE happens. For the high school and the middle school, there's already some scrutiny and already some sort of heat on my face, right? The openly gay male teacher, oh my gosh, is somebody going to say something? And somebody could not want me to win, right? And could say something. And so if you're considering running, the bright spots far outweighed the dark spots, but there were dark spots. And you just have to be ready for them. And again, it is a family affair. This is, the conversation was with my mother, my sister, who has skeletons in her closet, and you don't know if they're going to come back. It is truly bearing yourself bare for everybody to look in. You don't wait for them to open the closet. You actually have to open the closet. And Zach mentioned that earlier about sort of, why would anybody do that? Because you really are at the mercy of people. But if you do it, it has to be every single person that's around you sort of circling the wagons, and you're in the middle, and you ask their permission to do it. But it is definitely a community, a family affair, and you've got to make sure that those people are there.
Awesome. Thank you. Sheena, I can't say it. Everyone who knows me knows I can only say Sheena Marie Barnes. It's just what I say. You are serving in office. You have this great opportunity to talk to people who are considering running. What do you have to say to them?
Say, believe in yourself. And everything, like the other folks were saying, like, you think of everything that can go wrong. My children are in the schools as well. And it's like, oh my goodness, I'm openly LGBT. What if somebody says, this or that, and also losing friends that I thought were cool. It was like, with their stigmas about LGBTQ folks. But you got to put like everything, what I did, I can say what I did. I wrote down everything that I thought was going to come back, even from when I was not a good citizen when I was a juvenile. And I just wrote everything down I thought everybody would say about me. And I balled it up and I said, F it, because what I found is people are voting for more of folks they can relate to. They don't want the same, cisgender, 50-year-old, white, male identified, money having person that represents them. And so if you can bring something to the table, different flavor, a different viewpoint, do that, because people are really, really getting tired of the same scenes. As you can see, as more increased LGBT folks, Q folks are running their races right now. So definitely just try their best to breathe, and everything you think you shouldn't run for, that's why you should. I think Toledo Public Schools needed a Black, queer, fluffy woman that cuss and drinks wine and to have kids, so, and there it is. So definitely you can do it, believe in yourself. I would say research your position. That's one thing that's really helpful, to know what you're getting into, who to talk to. Also, you want to make sure you know your surroundings. When I say that, is like, we had to get 250 signatures and the city council only had to get 50. And I was like, what? So that was kind of something I didn't know. My best advice though is get involved. Like, help with the somebody else's campaign before you, like, if you thinking about running, assist another campaign or another candidate. Do a voter registration. That is the best way to get people to vote for you. If you go the year before and get them signed up to vote and explain how to vote and why it's important, then you come back the next year and say, hey, I'm on the ballot. That's why it was important. I want to speak and represent, what your cause and your issues are to the whatever seat I'm doing. So that really helped me a lot. So definitely get involved. Look who's running. Support LGBTQ folks. Support people of color running. And get involved and help with their campaign is the best advice I can give you, and all the other stuff I just said.
Thank you. Reggie and Zach, we're going to end with you, but Reggie, because you're going to talk about redistricting too, just FYI, be prepared. Reggie, let me tweak the question just a little bit for you. You're in the midst of this process right now. And as Sheena just spoke about, having a really firm grasp of why you're running, what would you advise to potential candidates as you are in the middle of this, about holding tightly to why run, to have a reason for running, and how important that is for you?
So I think, I don't know, I have a different opinion about running, and I just think this shit is really hard. and I personally don't think that everyone should run. I think that it is a huge undertaking. And I think that it depends upon context and community.
Yeah.
So in some communities, right, the cost of running as an openly queer person, it has a high cost. And so you really have to balance that, right? And so I think that conversation and considering running in one community is very different than thinking about the cost of running in a community that maybe there's more LGBTQ representation.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that, okay, then when you run, I think that we have seen in this particular moment that there is a way in which a good campaign also can be very impactful to the discourse without winning. Right, so I think about Stacey Abrams. I think about locally Yvette Simpson. Yvette Simpson is a Black woman who ran for the mayor of Cincinnati in 2017, lost, and has now become the executive director of Democracy for America, the largest PAC, progressive PAC in the United States. And she's also a political contributor for ABC News. And she got there because of how she ran, right? And so I think that that's the other piece of how you run your campaign. And then I think a part of campaigning that often is skipped over is really understanding your why. Yeah. And that's a hard thing to articulate. And you can immediately see and you immediately feel it when you speak to candidates that have a very clear, defined, gut level why, they wrap you in, versus candidates that are very competent and really passionate, but like the why isn't there, you know? And so I think that like, if you are going to run, before taking that step, my recommendation is to identify gut level and for you to feel it in your bones and then be committed to doing that work and thinking about how you impact your community with your campaign.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Zach, we are giving you the last word. You are in contact with all of these different people, and you are reaching populations. I think all of you are just reaching populations that other people may not be able to, and you're putting yourselves out there in this unbelievable, generous of spirit and time and energy way to serve your communities. For you, Zach, when you're chatting with someone who may say to you, gosh, I'm thinking about doing this, but I'm just not sure, what might you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could have ended perfectly on Reggie's wisdom right there. I thought that was awesome, you know, and like, I think I would echo a lot of those things in my response. You know, being very confident in your why will make running for office infinitely easier. You know, and if you've gone through all of that, you know, and you're on the edge, and something as silly as being worried about a mailer, you know, you should definitely go for it. You know, if that's the one thing holding you back. And I'll be honest with you, it was terrifying. You know, there was a moment in the campaign where there were 3 new attack mailers every other day. My mom was getting things saying that I was like a terrible person. You know, it's like I got calls from my grandma being like, oh my God, you know, what can we do to stop this? And then the TV ad started, and then the radio ad started, and it's like, all of that was, you know, it's like getting hit by a truck. And if I'm being honest, I was terrified that the next attack ad was going to be on my sexuality, right? And like that was definitely something that day after day I was like, oh, it's coming tomorrow. I just know it's coming tomorrow, you know. And like it ended up never coming, you know. But if we don't talk about it, you know, in a forum like that, it's definitely something we all worry about, you know. And like for me, this was the most like publicly I've ever like discussed my sexual, you know. I'm on a panel right now with strangers, you know, people that I don't really know, and like talking about my sexual, that this is all very new to me. And I still, even after running for office for a year and a half, am still like learning at, you know, me, like how I'm most comfortable in talking about it, how I can best like be an advocate for a community, you know, that is very diverse, certainly much more diverse than just me, you know. And I think finding ways to be an ally, you know, of that community, but also of just, you know, the people who need help, you know, the people, you know, the kids growing up in Lorain County that, you know, are growing up, like I personally, my family grew up on food stamps. You know, Mark, you were talking about that, and that was a big thing for me. On we're not living in a society where everyone, regardless of, you know, your race, your sexuality, your everything, has an equal shot to get ahead. And I think if you're thinking about doing something about that, and you're thinking about running for office, and you feel a connection to that, and feel like you can move us in the right direction, go for it. You know, I'm putting my email in the chat, you know, reach out. You know, I'd be happy to be a sounding board for you. And I think, don't want to sign up everyone on the panel for that, but I think all of us are eager to be an advocate for you guys and being a sounding board. And Dara was a big one for me, you know, in the campaign, being just a district over. And it was like, I felt like if I could redo something, I would have called Dara on day one and been like, we got to talk every other week, you know, and be more connected, you know. But I don't know, long answer, rambling on a bunch of different things. But I mean, if you're thinking about it, I say go for it, but think long and hard about it.
Nice, thank you. For as many people as I truly believe have said to all 5 of you that you have inspired them, that represents only a fraction of the people that you have inspired. And I am so appreciative on behalf of everybody listening and everybody watching this, even after tonight. Your decision to put yourselves out there in this way and run for your communities and be this voice is truly, I don't have other words that I'm sure I could come up with other words, but inspiring is the one that I'm sticking with. And you all truly have made a difference, and we thank you for this. We also want to thank our 2 sponsors. Thank you to Equality Ohio. We love you, Equality Ohio. Please give Equality Ohio a follow at Equality Ohio. I will put that in the chat. And please give a follow to @the Buckeye Flame. And if you are not following the Buckeye Flame, we have board members for Equality Ohio on the call and board members for the Buckeye Flame on the call. And we thank you all for the support. We will surely sponsor more in the future. But for right now, panelists, thank you so much for your time, for your energy, and truly for your inspiration. Thank you all.